Welcome to the Pantheon Plus Rewind.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 83 of the Pantheon Plus Rewind, the usually weekly show about Pantheon, Rise of the Fallen, and its community. This week, we open up our gift bag to our listeners, we catch up on the last dev stream, see what everyone's doing while we wait for Pantheon, talk a little bit about item prestige, and continue our journey with the Gnomes of Terminus. So let's get sentimental, as me, Desrin, and my jolly co-host, Theric, share tales around the hearth. Happy holidays, everyone, and thanks for joining us in this week's Rewind. Okay, there are just so many holiday puns that I wanted to put into that intro. As I was writing it, I was just shaking my head, but I have...
Your restraint is impressive.
I didn't want to turn everyone away too soon, because we've got a great show. We did take the week off last week, so of course there's a lot of catch up to do. So I do really want to dive in. Not much going on my end, so but yeah, I think this time is going to be a little bit longer, maybe. So
yeah, I think we have some show to make up for our little time off last week. So if we go a little long today, don't be surprised.
Yeah, just buckle up, everyone. It's gonna be a great adventure.
It's gonna be a sleigh ride through the hills, if you will.
Here we go. Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't control myself. I had to throw a Christmasism in there.
I'm sure this won't be the last.
No, it won't. I'm telling you right now.
Well, we do have an adventure to go on, but as with most real adventures, it is best observed and experienced with a party. So let's start our adventure right with some group invites. So our adventuring party this week is going to be BitCrunch on the Ashen Elf Shaman.
Who is a new party member, I want to add in.
Yes. I've seen BitCrunch so much lately around the community, like very active, a lot of really cool stuff, including some stuff for Baz, I think.
Yeah, over on Basgrim's little corner of the world there. So yeah, awesome to have you join us there, BitCrunch.
Yeah, man. And naturally we have Shuriken on the Dwarf Cleric, Jason on the Scar Beard Lord, Ziplocs on the Darkmer Rogue, Sparrow on the Elf Ranger, and Bounty Code on the Human Wizard. So thanks a bunch, everyone, to our adventuring party. Thanks for being back after 2 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Rewind isn't a thing without our community around, and we appreciate the support. And if you're here for the premiere and you want to join the adventuring party for the next show, you can do that through the super chat function. You can go in there and check it out and see how that works. You can also go over to the Patreon page if you're listening via audio only and you want to join the party or just support the show. We have a end credit screen with some of the Patreon folks. But before we get to the actual show, this is sort of related, but this has been an amazing year for the Rewind, just in terms of the show and what it's about and the hype that's been generated by our adventuring party, by the supporters, by everybody who just comes out and even listens to the show. It's been infectious and in a good way, not in a COVID kind of way. So Desert, like you mentioned in the intro, it's time to hand out some holiday treats for our awesome community, and we're gonna go big for the end of the year. I like to go big at the end of the year, and I want everybody to know how much we appreciate it. We're going to give out some pledges today. We got a $250 Pathfinder pledge, and that means alpha access, just FYI. We've also got a $150 Protector pledge, a $100 Legate pledge, and that one is courtesy of the great Vendini, a friend of the show, guildmate of ours, and overall good Canadian dude. And that one gives you beta access. Both of those pledges give you beta access. And then we've also got two $50 Watchers pledges to give away today. So it's a bonanza of under the tree gifts for our community, and you can get the full list of the pledges, of the perks those pledges provide over at pantheonmmo.com. And if you're here for the premiere, you're already halfway through how to participate in this giveaway, what you want to do is you want to hit me up in chat. Just hit @Theric with the YouTube play button emoji. And that means I know you're interested in putting your name in for these pledges. And at the end of the show, we'll throw the names in a random name picker and announce the winners. And the only restriction on this is that if you've won a pledge on the show before, maybe don't go for it again. But if you want to enter your name and give it to a friend and family member, we can do that. If you already have a pledge and you want to upgrade it, that's also something that VR can do. So all that to say, lots to give away today. I will give a little reminder as we get to the end of the show, right before the lore segment, to listen for your names, because we're going to throw the names and start doing the selection. But good luck to everybody, and I hope that this is exciting for you guys as it is for us, because we just make these shows when we do these giveaways is always a good time, right, Des?
Yeah, this is going to be awesome. I was so happy to have so many things to give away, and I can't wait to see who wins.
And of course, the trade-off for me is that during the show, I'm busy writing down names and making sure I've written them all down correctly and that kind of stuff. So maybe I get distracted from the chat during the premiere. If you notice I'm not as active in chat, it's maybe because I'm writing down names, but I will do my best to stay on track. So yeah, big show. Let's get going. Hey, Des, let's get the show on the road.
Let's get the sleigh going.
This week in Visionary Realms News and Notes. All right, so VR News and Notes. We've got a couple things to catch up on, given we were off last week. Let's get right to it. The VR dev stream was on December 9th, and it was called Forging Terminus. And they really showed us how things are coming together. It was one of those very much show and tell type updates, and these are my favorite ones, of course. The more you get to see, the better off. I think we all are. It was the kind of update I expect, we're going to see more of in the new year when things come around, and with zone creation, zone building, as they start to do the landscapes, do things, build these zones out. I think we should maybe expect to see more of this kind of thing. They did review some of the zones we've seen in the past, that being things like Amber Fate and Black Rose Keep. And if you watched the stream, you saw those screenshots, and the question was actually asked afterwards on Pantheon Plus U when Ronik from VR was in the chat there. The question was asked, are those old screenshots or have they been converted through the HDRP process? And Ronik did state that they were the old ones. Those zones haven't been converted through the HDRP process at this point. So maybe that's something we'll see down the road at some point too. But in any event, in addition to zone visuals, we saw a lot of information about the gate. We saw inside and outside, both concept art and some in-game video screenshots. We saw some flyby stuff, which was pretty cool, of Wild's End. Seeing the terrain post HDRP, because as Joppa said on the stream, we saw the Greybox version just a couple months back, right? So yeah, it was pretty cool. Anything from that, Desrin, you wanted to note before we talked about the next piece?
Oh man, I have to give a round of applause for the formatting of that dev stream. Like, if they just kept this formula and repeated it, I think it would show some very good indicators of community happiness, just because there was just such a good balance of everything. Like you said, it was showing, telling, it, like even having the overlaid concept art or markup with the 3D, it just, man, it was just a little bit of everything. It was just so complete. And I really loved, I think it came out absolute like 10 out of 10 stream. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say.
Yeah, it was really, really well received. And I just think once you can see things, like we talk a lot and we get a lot of ideas, and, there's a lot of theory crafting that goes on, and but this was, like I said, you got to actually see the process and see it being, the construction being undertaken. So I think that instills a lot of confidence. And, I like I said, I want to see more of this in the new year. I think that we're moving now towards a place where Pantheon's development is taking us to a more complete understanding of the world we're going to be living in. So pretty cool. And there was, like you said, hype on the stream afterwards during Pantheon Plus U. But there was one more thing I wanted to talk about with you, and we didn't really talk about it on that show that much. So I thought this would be a good place to maybe dig in toward or chew on it, as Joppa said during the stream. And I actually clipped the audio because I want our listeners to be able to hear what he said, because I think it's important. So listen to this couple clips in a row here that we're going to talk about.
Well, and I just want to say, while we're looking at all these weapons, it's probably a good time to double down on the fact that what you're seeing here, I think for most of us, we're used to seeing weapons and weapon variety. It affects animations, and we're kind of familiar with, certain classes can use certain weapons, that kind of thing. Better weapons do more damage, or, swing faster or whatever. In Pantheon, I want to double down on the fact that we want weapons and weapon types to play a significant role in combat and the experience of playing your character. And so we plan to go much, much more in depth. And we're going to do this in the new year when we're able to break down more of the details with our combat system improvements that we've talked about. But I want to leave you with 2 teasers to chew on leading up to that. So chew on this and be excited, for us to unpack this here in the near future. Number 1, our goal is to make weapon choice and skill a meaningful decision for all classes at all levels. I'll say that again. Our goal is to make weapon choice and weapon skill a meaningful decision for all classes at all levels. That does not mean that every class can use every weapon. But what it does mean is what weapons you have available to you, your choice of what weapon to use, and the skill that you've developed in that weapon. We want that to be meaningful. And number 2, weapon types and weapon skills are going to go much deeper in Pantheon than simply improving your chance to hit a target. Weapon types and weapon skills are going to go much deeper in Pantheon than simply improving your chance to hit a target. So I'm going to leave it at that. Plenty to chew on there, and we'll unpack more of that when we come to our combat system improvements.
Are there various ways to train your weapon skills, or will it strictly be leveled through combat?
We are considering some additional ways to do so. I'll, for sake of time, I'm not going to kind of go into the thought process, but it's even relatively recent discussions. We've gone pretty in depth on that specific thing, and some obviously through combat would be a definite and primary way to do it. Whether we incorporate the ability to interact with certain trainers that allow you to do that to some degree. Things like training dummies that you can find, whether it's in a city or in Black Rose Keep or something like that, up to a certain skill level. Training partner NPCs that you can find. Different. We're considering some different avenues, but more on that, I guess, when we get a few more definitive thoughts in mind.
Okay, so let's break that down a little, Des. Chop, firstly, the first clip when he talks about, the goal is to make weapon choice and skill a meaningful decision for all classes and all levels, and how weapon types and skills are going to go much deeper in Pantheon than simply your chance to hit the target. Like, he was really emphasizing that. And I'll tell you what it means to me is that when you are, certain classes get associated with certain weapons, rangers and bows, warriors with giant 2-handed hammers, right? There's always that idea that you have like that 2, 3, maybe 4 at the most weapons you're really proficient in and really have, if you're going to be at all effective in your playing your class, you have to pick one of those weapons, right? But I think that this is hinting at something that's going beyond that, and moving past that. I think that we're going to be looking at very much new archetypes of a class mentality. So, if you're a ranger that doesn't necessarily like bows, although that seems strange to me, maybe you're a ranger that wants to use a mace. I'll give you a good example, and this actually links into something we're going to talk about a little later in EverQuest. One of my most valued possessions was a ranger weapon from the Plane of Hate called the Color, and it was like a halberd type of weapon. I don't remember exactly the type it was, but it was very unusual and very much not a standard ranger weapon. But I thought it was so cool because it was so different and unique, right?
Yeah.
And it was good. It was actually quite a good weapon. The DPS on it was very good. The lay was very low and the damage was very high. So I used it, and a lot of people always sort of stopped and said like, "Hey, that's cool. You know, what is that?" So I think that's what the idea is here. And maybe I'm misinterpreting, or maybe I'm just seeing a piece of it. What do you make of this?
Well, first off, it really sounds like Joppa is indicating that we're going to have another information dump on this, perhaps with the combat changes that they've mentioned. So I'm going to reserve a lot of speculation for whenever that happens. But when he's talking about weapon skill not just being, a 2-hit, I actually go the route of, mob strengths, weaknesses, and how different damage can affect different things like that, where you might actually notice the difference, between piercing and slashing. It may go beyond that, but that's where my brain goes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Again, going much deeper into beyond the chance to hit. And I think that you're talking about, like you say, vectors of slashing damage, piercing damage, blunt damage, right? All these things. And in some of the more modern MMOs we've seen where your class is your weapon, right? Again, this is a very recent example of this, but New World is very much, that's what this is. You are defined by your weapon, and you can use basically anything, right? It's a question of, so I think that, and I'm hesitant to say that, they're taking anything from New World, because I don't think they are. On the other hand, we're constantly learning, and as they are, just as a human being, and how you are exposed to different things and ideas, and you see the value in something, even if it's not something you want to emulate, or it's not something you want to, take too much from. You see the value in an idea,
right,
or you see the value in the principle of something. So I think that, and again, you're making the more choices you make in a game, the more unique your character becomes, or the more identifiable your character even becomes.
Yes.
And I think that I like the idea of, I'm taking my character down this path of becoming a ranger who specializes in maces. I think that's a cool avenue. And it sounds like what they want to do, like you said, talk about this a little more later on. And that's almost exactly, that is what Joppa said, actually. He said, we're going to give you more information about this later. So I'm really interested to see where they're going with this.
Yeah, absolutely. Same.
Yeah. And then the second clip was talking about, training your weapon skills. Like, how does that go beyond combat? Is there any way to do that beyond just combat? And they said, yeah, they're thinking about they're having conversations about that. They talked about like things like trainers and training dummies, and looking at some different avenues to increase your weapon skills. I'm excited to hear that, weapon skill, even in itself, because that actually hasn't been something that they've confirmed. Like, we haven't really seen that on display in any of the gameplay streams where, your skill in slashing has increased, like that kind of old EverQuest mentality.
Right.
So that's kind of it's been obscured. It hasn't been there so prominently in any kind of the gameplay streams. So I'm kind of glad to hear that that's a thing, and that's going to be the way it is. So
it's entirely appropriate that it's kind of just gone under the radar too, because it is something that no one really thinks about. I mean, you could imagine like swimming skill, like everyone auto runs into a wall, like while they're, like that was just like a commonplace thing, or, you're just going to like auto attack some training dummy. It always comes across like a mundane thing, or games that just, oh, you're level 20, your skill in slashing is now 200. That's just like how it is,
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
it's just so VR to me for them to start building out a system and be like, we can do better here, and not make it in a way that's like, oh, well, we're going to make an entirely new, crazy, side of the game, but more just a refinement of like, hey, this is a place where the genre could grow. Why not take this opportunity? That just, it's so perfect to me because it really encapsulates why I enjoy the project. And that's because VR isn't saying, okay, well, these things already work. We're just going to do that all the time. And, move on to the other things that are supposed to be like the key areas that are going to be our marketing tidbits. They're not going to market weapon skills,
Yeah.
Let's be real, but they care about it. And so they're going to develop it. I appreciate that a lot. And I can't wait to hear more.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think back to my first day logging in to EverQuest. I was amazed by the fact that the more I kicked things, the better my kicking skill got. I don't know why, that just blew me away at the time. It was such a simple thing, but I just thought, man, that is cool. Like, so if I do this a lot, I get better at it. I'm like, okay, all right, down for that. And where are we going with that now? I mean, it's 2021 now, right? Like we need to acknowledge the coolness of that, but also go deeper, right?
Right.
So I think that's exciting. So we'll hear about that more in the new year and get to react to it then when we hear about it. But the other thing we saw in this stream and one of the big draws was the character models before and after and with regard to HDRP conversion. I said it on the show afterwards, but I absolutely love how the new models look. My only gripe is that I want to see more, as it always is. Can't wait until we have all 9 races represented like this. Joppa did say they're, quote, close to the finish line. And this pertains to not just the player character models, but also game-wide. So NPC models, everything. So if you're saying that, it sounds like he's saying, all the player race models are getting close to being done. And it's been a while. We saw the Darkmer, we saw the Archai and the Scar last year. It feels like there's this weird divide between there's these two groups of player character models, ones we've seen in game and ones we've only seen, in T-poses in developer streams. And I feel like they're like second-class citizens, and I'm ready to bring those second-class citizens into our world, right? And so I really, really want to see what they look like, especially with the conversion applied to them. Mm-hmm. So as a future Archai, Desrin, would you agree with this?
I mean, of course. It's funny that this even came up because just a couple days ago, I was talking with one of our guildies about the models. We're having a talk kind of about like how the elves look like stretched humans or, that kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. And it made me kind of dig back to when they last showed the updated models, which was early 2020.
It's crazy that it's been that long. It feels not that long ago, but yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of wild, but looking at that stream, I'm still like so happy about the models that were shown off there. And I don't know what the hang up is, whether if it, they just didn't have time to get them all rigged up for animation or maybe they did, but they had to redo it or whatever reason that we haven't really seen them. But the state they were in back then, if I imagine in my head, what does that look like in HDRP? I'm pretty happy. As an Archai main, I feel like it's just going to be perfect.
Because they looked pretty good back then. I mean, they looked pretty awesome back then.
They really did. And seeing those in engine, in a location, because that super matters.
It does.
It's going to be really great. And as hard as it's been not seeing those races, I feel like it just gives them something else to kind of show off, while they're working on everything. Because the content drought, it's bound to come at some point. We've had them in the past, and we've had a really good slew of information lately. So I might be a little bit like bracing myself, but it does give them something to show off that can make us really excited. And they already just look so much better, like the skin and everything. So I just can't wait to see how it looks. To say.
I want our family of Pantheon races to be complete. I want to see them all sort of in the game and running around.
Yeah, being able to play the game as the race that you want to play would be
makes a huge difference.
Big deal.
Yeah, well, it'd bring a lot of people in too, right? So, or I don't know, I guess maybe if you don't like it, then you won't bring people in, but I'm more confident that, the only reason I say that is because when I saw the elves finally in game, I have to admit I was a little bit surprised because they're a little different looking than I think, when you see them out of context, they look a little, I don't know, there's something different about them, but I'm learning to love them. Speaking of the character models, there was a comment actually on the stream and I wanted to point it out. Somebody said, I feel like some of the old art looked much better. Some of the new images seemed dull, faded, or lack of contrast, like the color had been pulled out with the brightness turned up too high. So he's just saying, they're saying maybe consider this. Not complaining, just wondering if if they looked a little chalky is the way he described it. And then actually the devs responded to this. They said, ignore the washed out look. It's going to change in the development process. We were just highlighting the HDRP changes for the stream. And I think Kilson was responding there. So he just clarified that. Yeah, because I noticed there was a little bit of a washed out look in terms of the coloring. But it's a good clarification. And I think that it's also to do with the lighting. And Ronick did point out on stream that it was flat light, right? So that played a role.
Yeah, like I said, seeing them in the environment will make all the difference as well. So pretty happy about that.
Yeah, so that was a good comment to clarify. And I also want to, while we're speaking about character artwork, on the stream they announced the hiring of Philip Kedge as their character artist for them. And if you're a listener of this show, that name might seem familiar to you because Philip was a Rewind fan. Probably still is, but he did contribute that amazing 3D artwork of the Archimental to our fan artwork reel. Obviously, now that he works for VR, we won't be seeing that anymore. But it's maybe not the last time we might see it if you know what I mean. But obviously, very talented and a wonderful artist, character artist working in a digital medium. So very cool. And Joppa actually noted on the stream that Philip's been tearing through the artwork that they've been tasked. They've tasked him with. So awesome. And congrats, Phillips, on getting hired on.
What a nice surprise, right? That was totally left field for me. I was like, wait, Philip, wait a second. Oh, man, that's so really, it gives me the good fuzzies.
Yeah, I know, man. It's totally cool. It was out of left field. I had no idea. But great hire, obviously. So that's the news, and just wanted to review the stream. Go watch the dev stream if you haven't seen it already. Obviously, it's been a couple weeks now, and there's no excuse for not having watched it. You should have, but wanted to give a few highlights. And let's get on to some fun stuff and talk about some notes from VR. This week on Twitter, VR wanted to know what we're playing over the holidays. So, Des, I love talking about what other games I'm playing right now, because I feel like we don't get to do this enough. I feel like I don't get to shout out my fellow community members who are what they're playing, and I don't get to talk about some of the other fun genres that I like to play. So we're going to do that. So we'll get to what we're playing in a minute, but let's start with some of our community members. First up, Ang S is a loyal listener and always there with the comments. They said, I've burned through my backlog, recently finished playing Lost Judgment, which they gave an A+, and just started playing Disco Elysium. Not much else on my Not much else on my plate right now. I want to play. Umming and ahhing until about going back on P99. I have permission, but you know what I really want. Yeah, as we all do. This is sort of the theme throughout this was I really want to play Pantheon, and that's nothing else. But I liked his comment about Disco Elysium is actually a game I've had on my radar for a bit. You sort of sounded like you were interested in that one too.
Yep, haven't played it yet, but I mean, the reviews and all the spotlights I've seen on Disco Elysium and the developer that makes Disco Elysium, I'm very intrigued, even though it's not the kind of game that I would typically gravitate towards. It's on my wish list.
Yeah, it's I'm gonna play it at some point. I feel like I need to play it when I'm in a certain mood because it's very much story and it's very much mood and not like there's no combat or anything like that, or at least it's minimal. It sort of like reminds me of Tides of Numenera is right. Is that the game I'm thinking of? That's very story heavy. Anyway, the next one was from Libwick, another a great fan of the show, and they said super surprised there was only like one other New World mentioned, but they've been playing New World, and they said it's not Pantheon, but I'm enjoying it. playing on a really small population server, which I'm not used to. Pretty fascinating to see the dynamic change from the big population servers. So yeah, man, New World is, I think every server right now is low population because they're in the middle of.
They're about to do server merges, actually.
Yeah, they're about to merge everything and get the servers put together, which obviously was going to happen from day one because of the number of servers that game has. So yeah, Libbook, I'm going to get back into New World eventually. I know, Desrin, you and I have sort of drifted away a little bit from that. I'm looking forward to reconnecting with it at some point for sure.
I actually kind of feel bad because I referred Libwick to Vela, Sakari and Moxis and Kid Lead, that the guild that they put together, which is still going strong. As far as I've heard, they've basically taken over that server.
Yeah, the whole server is purple now. I've seen it.
I feel bad because I referred Libwick, and then like right after that, I just stopped playing.
Yeah, know what, that happens sometimes.
But yeah, I think everyone that's still playing New World, they're just playing. Because if they say anything, everyone jumps on them.
Yeah, exactly. Good on you, Libwick, for being bold and not being afraid to be, shouted down by the mob of everybody hates New World, right? Because it's just whatever. You got to play what you like, and you got to play it until you don't like it anymore. I mean, that's the way it is.
That's right. I love this next one, by the way.
Yeah, I was just gonna say this next one is awesome. So this is from Jason Ramsey, aka at Jace Owns on Twitter. And they included a screenshot, which is super cool. So they said they're playing a free Ultima Online shard called UO Outlands. They said it's a blast from the past, blast from the past with something freshish. And the screenshot is just so classic UO, like Ultima Online, with his avatar and his, character shot and a nice wagon, which again is very Ultima-esque. Makes me want to go play it, actually. Makes me want to.
Honestly, it totally did for me too, because my first exposure to Ultima was actually on an emulator server, a friend of mine, and I had such a blast. But at the same time, we were playing EQ2 at the time, so it was not going to happen. But it was really cool to see this in the comments here.
Yeah, and I'm looking at his screenshot, and so if you see in the screenshot, it says he is the glorious Jason's legendary weapon master. So if you are on UO Outlands and you see Jason's running around, you heard it here first. So yeah. The next one's from our pal Walking Waste. They're playing Halo Infinite, War Tales, and League of Legends. And Halo Infinite, we have recent experience with. We played that on Tuesday for MMORPG Classes 101. Have to admit, I had more fun than I thought I would. I am not an FPS player at all, but you know what? It's a good time. It's a good time.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I love all the different genres in here, right? Like
yeah, totally. Like you got to be a multi-genre type of gamer, I think. I think sometimes we get too stuck in one genre. So yeah, good on him for playing different stuff there.
Yeah. Hit me up, by the way, Walking Waste. My name's Desrin on League of Legends. So
right.
Unless you're a big super
league
good
player. Yeah, definitely. You have that one all to yourself. I'm never going to play League of Legends, but I will support you.
It's fine. You don't have to play League of Legends, but you do have to watch Arcane. That's all.
I am going to watch Arcane. Yes, I've been convinced because everybody says it's so good, and you don't have to know anything about League to enjoy Arcane. So it's now on my list. The next one's from Marie Thomas at Joyful for Eternity on Twitter. And they said Final Fantasy XIV, New World, Rift, and Elder Scrolls. They said, I'm ready for Pantheon and happy holidays to everyone at Pantheon. So awesome, Marie. Thanks for commenting there. And yeah, no, Rift, I think, Desrin, you're going to talk about that in a minute here, aren't you?
Yeah, a little bit maybe. But I also just 4 MMOs here. Holy moly.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
I wish I could manage 4 MMOs at one time, but it's like Drax said before, he says, I'm a one MMO kind of guy. I'm kind of like that too. Yep. I can only focus on one MMO at a time. There's too much going on. There's such big, you have to learn so much, it's like my brain just doesn't hold that kind of information anymore. The next one's from our friend Lucille, and they mentioned The Long Dark, Dungeon Warfare 2, and Darknet. So I included Lucille's post because they're a big fan and they're always in the community and well known. But I also, The Long Dark is vastly underrated game. If you do not know what The Long Dark is, you got to go check it out. It was a Kickstarter project back, man, like almost, I want to say like 7 years ago, 8 years ago now. Canadian company, Hinterland Studios, I think is the name of the company that makes it. And it's like a survival game. You sound like you know what it is, Des. You're
yeah,
aware of that.
I was about to rave about it if you weren't going to, because even just saying it's a survival game is totally like not.
Yeah, not even close to
so
all
much
it is.
more.
Like if I mean, it's hard to talk about without giving away like the story of it, but basically like the premise is like, you know, your plane crashes in the Arctic wilderness somewhere. You know, like there's a full story behind this as well. And then basically there's been some sort of an event in the world that's knocked out, you know, power and basically all. And it's not a like a survival in terms of like other players. It's a very much a story-driven survival game, and I absolutely love it. And they're still developing for this game. Like the developers they still send like
so much
Kickstarter
support.
emails.
There's so much like additions too that they've done. They're a real class act, honestly.
They really are. And if you should go support them. They're a good company. So yeah, good one there, Lucille. The last one is from Gravitational Waves. And they said Fallen Earth has been resurrected, and it's an excellent apocalyptic sandbox with top-notch crafting, and they're having a lot of fun with it. So I've heard of Fallen Earth. I think I've checked out some videos. I've never dove into it or played it. Have you any experience with Fallen Earth?
I've only heard of it. I haven't watched anything, and just from that, I'm like, you know, I gravitate towards those games, so I might have to check that out.
Yeah. So there's some good games for your wish lists if you're listening to this and you're not like playing anything right now and you want to get into something. Those are all good suggestions. For me, I've been playing Wasteland 3 lately, and this came out a while ago. And it was one of those games I started, and I love the old Wasteland games, like even the first one back in the DOS days. But Wasteland 2 was an excellent game, and Wasteland 3 is even better than Wasteland 2 was. If you like, you know, turn-based, party-based, you know, tactical role-playing games, sort of, that's the genre I think it fits into. But the story writing, the writing is really good. It's got tons of personality. It's sort of a cross between Fallout and Baldur's Gate is what I would make it the closest akin, you know, like an or two, as Joppa would say. But I'm playing that right now, and I know there's some folks out there that are also fans of that I've spoken to. I just started playing Slay the Spire. I was looking for a game the other day, and I just started playing it. I heard it was so good, and then I thought, you know what? Finally, I'll check it out, and it is good. Like it is a nice, easy, not easy, but like it's a light game to play. You don't have to invest a lot of like time and you know, mental energy to get into it. If you understand, you know, roguelikes and card mechanics, that kind of thing, deck building kind of games, super fun. So big recommend for me. Those are the main two ones. Of course, I've got other games installed that I'm not playing, that I'm unwillfully ignoring right now just because there's only so many hours in the day. But lots of stuff to get to in the new year. What about you, Des? What are you playing?
Well, just recently, a lot of members of the Plus Guild started playing Rift. And being that I missed out on that during that time frame, I was playing other games, or actually, I think at that point I had kind of stopped playing. But I was like, hey, why not? You know, this will be an experience so that I can, you know the mechanics of Rift and everything. And being that it's with the Plus Guild, it's obviously a blast.
Yeah, it is fun.
So yeah, I plan on playing that a little bit more. I think I've only played like one day so far, but so far it's got some interesting mechanics, so I'm probably going to continue with that.
Nice.
As far as other games though, because I feel I tend to play bad games, or games that are publicly perceived as bad. And so naturally I'm playing Battlefield 2042.
Okay. Nice.
And I'm actually looking forward to this mod pack called Wildlander for Skyrim.
Yeah, I saw you talking about this in Discord the other day. I had to go check it out too because you were raving about it.
Yep, and unfortunately, there's not much to check out unless you like watch the streams that he does. Him being Dylan Perry, but a lot of assistance from various people. But it's a really big deal, and all of their kind of design mindsets align with my own. And so I've been
Hmm.
waiting on this for over a year, but basically since they announced that they're doing this again, because the project used to be called Ultimate Skyrim. It was a little bit different, but that's coming out on January 7th, and I am going to lose myself in that. I'm not even going to lie. Like, I know I'm playing some other
Nice.
games, but I know the jokes are that, Skyrim's had so many versions and stuff, but if you are looking for like a real like role play experience for Skyrim, check out Wildlander. I'm definitely going to be playing. I'm even thinking about like streaming it if
Dude, you totally should.
because I really want to do like a cooperative thing with like asking people like, hey, what would my character do, playing it like full role play. So
Yes.
but yeah, that's going to be in January. So but yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting into. Not much else, honestly. I pretty much don't play video games except once every like few days now. Maybe the exception might be Rift with the guild, but we'll see.
Nice. Yeah, that's fun, man. Those are both really good recommendations, and I really want to check out that Skyrim stuff too because that's right up my alley. So, yeah, so cool. So let us know in the comments what you're playing right now. What's going to get you through the holidays? What's keeping you satisfied until Pantheon comes around? Yeah, always interesting to hear, and always on the lookout for new interesting experiences. So that's it for VR stuff on our end, on Pantheon Plus end. I've got a big announcement to make, and I'm excited to share this because this is something that we've been sort of working on for a while. So coming up, we are hosting a year-end mega stream with some familiar faces from the Pantheon community. So you may have heard of the Nathan Napalm. He is our resident content creator, puppeteer, singer, vengeful paladin, and so much more. But so he's going to be on the stream. Of course, we're going to have Basgrim, the legendary first fan to ever play Pantheon, the creator of the Library of Pantheon, which you can check out, and the go-to guide for facts and figures when it comes to the Pantheon project. And then, of course, we've got our own Fireball Flinger, MMO robber baron himself, and Twitch streamer, Drac Attack, will be there. And then I'm going to be there, too, just to make sure that those, goofballs don't screw up too much of the lore in terms of names and places and all that good stuff. So it's going to be me, Nathan Napalm, Basgrim, and Drac. And I feel like there is somebody I'm forgetting, and I know it's on the tip of my tongue. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're having Minus from VR join us too. So we're getting the band back together because Minus, you may remember him from such shows as this podcast and Pantheon Plus U, and from MMORPG Classes 101. But of course, now he is VR's associate content creator. And after joining the team, he's been repping Visionary Realms awesomely. And we're reached out and we were able to snag him for our year-end stream. So he's going to get a chance to show up and talk about what VR, from a VR perspective, year-end kind of stuff. And that's the idea of this stream, is to just sort of reflect on the year that's been for all of us as content creators, as community members, as from VR's perspective. And we'll try and squeeze some beans from Minus if we can. Probably nothing, can't promise anything, but we can at least remind him that not being amongst us community peons anymore is, he's missing out on some things. But anyway, it's going to be a lot of fun. Anyway, so this is all happening on December 30th at 9 p.m. Eastern on the Pantheon Plus Twitch channel. So I'll put a link in the description for the channel, which you can put a link, you can put a reminder on, put a bookmark in, do whatever you can to remind yourself, because we're going to have a real fun, cozy stream, just reflecting on the year that was, like I said. And to sweeten the deal, just like today on here, we're going to give away a pledge, and we're going to give away an advisor's pledge on the stream. So that's a $300 value, and that includes alpha testing access. So again, another good reason to join us for that. We do hope you will join us, and we hope to get a big crowd out for this exciting event. And can't wait to see you there. Again, that's December 30th, 9 p.m. Eastern. You'll see a graphic on the screen that if you're watching the video version of this podcast, that you can use as a reminder for yourself. But exciting stuff, and can't wait for that. So that's it for this week's VR News and Notes. When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into the forums and fan projects to see what the discussion's all about.
All right. Today's community discussion was started by Rufious on the official forums. So Rufious calls back to a previous discussion that we even brought onto the Rewind a while ago, if I recall, about item history. Really loved that discussion, by the way. But that was
it was a good one.
Describes like a kind of log of events for certain items. And Rufious also brings up another discussion about shiny items for collectors. And with both of those things in mind, Rufious notes a few potential problems with those ideas, like keeping track of a huge log for each item. And the idea that Rufious is throwing out here is that maybe there could just be a simple counter for item drops so that it would show if you were, say, the first person to loot something or the 10th or whatever on the server or in the world. Now, Rufious says it could lead to some, of those first items dropping and kind of going for a premium when players are trading, or other kind of prestigious things that could go along with that number, the counter on the item. So I think Rufious is trying to give space for people that just like to collect things that have a sentimental value or as we're saying, prestige, without actually making those things more powerful directly. The reason I brought this discussion, though, is because it really turns into just that. So before you kind of click off, let's kind of get into how people are responding. Because right off the bat, how does that suggestion make you feel?
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, I think that if you can give items a little bit more identity, anything you can do to give items more identity is probably a good thing. But also not to the point where every item is unique in and of itself. I don't think that that's where we want to go eventually. Like, I don't think that's where I would want a game to take item identity, because that feels like then you get into the randomness sort of mentality of it's not really, what do I get from owning this thing? There's a number on it that seems to make it unique to me, but it's just a number. You want to have real, like, significant identity, not just identity for the sake of it.
Right. Well, let's kind of see where this goes as far as the discussion, because this thread is adding up now, and there are a few cool perspectives in here. So right off the bat, Kennedil says that they enjoyed those messages that go out for getting an item for the first time in games like EQ, I believe, and some other games where you're the first to pick up an item or kill a boss or whatever. It would show a message, and even if it was like minor items. So they think adding some kind of tracking number to that would have some value. Now, Canoodle also says that it didn't really make them specifically want to rush for world firsts, but they do recognize that it probably could drive some people to do that. But also that, those kinds of people are going to exist anyway, regardless if there's a number or anything. Some people just like going for the first, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know, man. Those like announcements that wasn't always there. Like, that wasn't always a part of MMOs. Like, and I really don't like that. I don't want, like, I would turn it off as soon as I found out I could. I would just turn that off, because I don't need, like, it. I hate to go to the immersion breaking argument, but it's so immersion breaking, and it's so wow, how would I know? How would I know that? Like, if I'm just out wandering in the world, how would I know that somebody looted something for the first time halfway around the world?
Yeah, it's like Drac was the first to loot the slimy lizard tail.
Well, first of all, Drac would never loot it. He would buy it because Drac, and then he would sell it for a higher price.
That's right. Actually, well. So regarding the messages, and this is a little bit different, but I remember back in my experience as EQ2, where they may have had those like server first messages. I actually can't remember, but the messages that they did have were, that I remember, had to do with epics. and it showed across the server, like, the earth goes silent as such and such loots, this epic item. And it also showed the guild they were from. And it also linked the items so that, you could click on it for a little bit of something to drool on, right?
A little bit of flexing.
Yeah. And the thing is, I don't think that ever stopped. I think as after they introduced epics, it continued on to, maybe even to this day. So if you get your epic, it'll actually show a little message to the entire server. But that, to me, announcing that accomplishment, even though technically epics aren't unique, right? But it was a very long process. It was a very involved process. And I think that adding like the guild as well added a certain amount of like guild notoriety. And then you would see everyone in like different chat channels being like, oh, grats, oh, it looks like this guild is, running their final epics today, or, stuff like that. And I actually remember that fondly.
Yeah, I don't know, man. To me, it would be cooler if you like heard you were talking to somebody in your guild. They're like, oh, did you hear about, so-and-so from whatever guild that they got this, server first, or they looted this item that nobody else has. Like, wouldn't it be cooler to hear it from somebody rather than have the game announce it to you?
I mean, yes. Yeah. I think in general, it would be cooler to get that through natural means. And I'm really not one for flexing, but the day I got my epic, the upgraded epic, and it goes across the screen, and I was in my small guild when I got it, and it got to like say to the entire server like, hey, our guild exists, and we're able to do this. It felt good, and I don't think I would like hit up the chat channels in OOC and be like, yo guys, like
I don't. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, I get it. I get it. I think what it does, and we sound like we could have a whole discussion just about this one particular thing, but like, it creates a thing where if you haven't had that happen to you, or your guild hasn't had that, you're not as good. Like it sort of creates a motivation because it's going to get announced to everybody. Whereas like if you do it and that wasn't there, you're sort of relying on word of mouth and reputation to bolster your personal or your guild's status in the world.
Yeah. No, I get that. And eventually once the luster kind of wore off, people would totally join like random, guilds with, very creative names before they did that last turn in, so that it was broadcast to the entire server, which there were some definitely not terms of service friendly situations there. But and to be clear, the original idea, so we don't get too far off back in my like sentimental land. This is talking about a item showing like if you were the first person to get it, second person, third person,
right?
Rather than the just the straight up announcement. I feel like these things do kind of go hand in hand a little bit. And the discussion will be very, around server first and stuff, as you'll see. But to me, I'm not big on server first. It doesn't push me, right? Like, even for like a guild, being a part of a raiding guild, like we are really wanting to push to avatars, but not really to be first, because we figured, someone else is always going to get there first. And it's like,
I like server first, like experiences more than server first items, I guess. Maybe like if you told me that I was the first person to find a cave in the game, that would be, that's what I'm looking for.
That's true. But that's more of a personal thing, right? Something that would be, your own information, right?
They would announce to the whole server that I found, Derek has found a cave.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could go all these different ways, but regarding the counter, because the first few responses I pulled here are going to have to do with the counter that was suggested. So Dorothea isn't really a huge fan of a counter attached to an item. They seem to think that the challenge of and this is kind of what we're talking about, but the challenge of whatever you're trying to accomplish and like the victory from that is a better reward than like a number on an item. So I think Dorothea kind of makes a case for like if you saw maybe on your epic weapon or some major item that you finally got or finally looted after some time, and you saw that you were number 3,221.
Yeah, it's meaningless at that point.
It might even feel worse, right?
Yeah, terrible. It's actually the opposite. It's like,
so,
at this, I feel terrible. I'm logging out.
So like, but yeah, having a number associated with that, it kind of goes both ways though. Like it feels good if you're number one, but like if you're not,
it doesn't feel so good.
Yeah. And actually on that note, Ixar had a short little post that I'll just straight up quote here, saying, not a fan of any extra data being attached to items. A value attached to items only serves to inflate the accomplishments of a few and diminish the same accomplishment of the many to follow. And I think that's right in line with how I kind of feel about server first. Is like, if you're super driven for server first, it probably feels great. And maybe even if you're not, right? If you just happen to stumble across something, you get lucky and it's like, oh wow, I'm like the first person to loot whatever that dagger was that dropped from the spider in the Fortress of Pyre stream. You're like, oh.
What if it's even if it's like a terrible item though? That's kind of funny if you found like, a total junk item that nobody would ever use or in any situation, but you're the first person to ever get it. Like, do you hang on to that? Like, what if you're like number one of like the worst item in the game?
You're like a scrap of red cloth or something like that. And it's, and the little counter that pops up, it just says like 01 or something like that. And you're like, oh man, I have to keep this for my sentimental value, right?
I think it would actually. I think people would start hoarding. You like, I've got number ones of everything. It's sort of like baseball card or like, sports card collecting. Like you've got the first edition of something, comic book collecting, all that kind of stuff. Like there's a collectible nature that you can go pretty far down.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what Rufious is trying to appeal to with this, in the sense of the people that are looking for that, like they might hit up the market and try to find that, the first, whatever item, just to have with their collection. It's just, to me, it's just so foreign because that just doesn't appeal to me at all. I'm not a huge like collector in real life, so maybe that's just my inexperience with that mindset.
I don't know. I probably could do it. I could probably get into it. I mean, there was a time in Skyrim that I was trying to collect every single book in the game, and I was putting it in my house. My house was a library in Skyrim, and I needed every single book in the game. I don't know if I ever got them, but yeah, I have that. I will get into that if I allow myself to. So
man, see that's something I would do, but I wouldn't care whether or not I'm the first person to get, the books though. Like if I have the books, that's awesome. I'm definitely a completionist because I totally made libraries in EQ2 as well in my house. Like my house was so laggy. It was ridiculous. But like that was more just to complete my own, like I have this item. I don't really care if I'm the first to have that item though, but I guess it wouldn't detract from like anything to have a number associated, I guess.
Yeah.
But
it's an interesting thought.
So Stonefish kind of believes that like the number isn't really the best way to like represent or create memories and attachment to an item. So, and this is a little sentimental here, but Stonefish is saying that, what you hear people talking about years later is like the journey that they had, especially if it involves other people. And even noting that while you might hear like the name of an item, you don't generally hear too much else about the item, right? Like you hear about, here's my journey to get the, you know, flowing black silk sash and et cetera, et cetera. Here's what we did to get it and everything. But like the item itself is kind of like whatever.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. It'd be kind of cool if there was like, you know, you were grouped with this person at the time, or like there was like a group, like a screenshot or something you could attach to the item.
And that's kind of what we're getting at with the, you know, when we talked about item history back a while ago. And I think I definitely lean towards that system, to be completely honest, versus like just having like a number of like, oh, I was the third to loot this or whatever. But I did want to note here, because Vijek actually points out something from the original post where Rufious kind of made it sound like it might cause too much of a hassle to have this huge database of this like history of an item and stuff. But to be clear, Vijek kind of says it's not really like a technological problem anymore. Like we can make massive detailed databases that are fairly performant. It's more of a design decision. Like, is it worth, you know, doing all that for this gameplay? Like, would it be beneficial enough to add a number of like, you know, keeping track of like you're the first person to get this or the fourth or whatever on every item, if that would actually benefit like enough people to make it worthwhile, or if it would benefit more people than it would detract from, like we gave with the example of like being, you know, the 1,000th, you know, to loot something, if that would actually detract from the experience. So, but it's definitely not a technological problem, right? I really wanted to pick this just for the discussion though, because I love seeing the mentality, and our community is fairly varied. And like we saw with the Twitter posts on, you know, who's playing what while we wait for Pantheon, it's all over the place, right? And so I really appreciate that about our community. But if I had to like kind of summarize the rest of the thread, or as it stands now, until all you guys start diving into it, if you haven't already, it seems like most people in the thread don't really want the game to incentivize that kind of world or server first crowd. Like we definitely have those folks in the community that do go for those like server first kind of a deals. But it seems the majority that responded, at least, aren't really about that life.
Yeah. I mean, I think that this is a discussion that, you know, we've sort of taken the ball and run with a little bit, you know, like we've discussed it before, and it's a great idea. And like, there's some really neat aspects of this. And I think there's some really interesting aspects of this. You know, at the end of the day, what people want is item identity, item prestige. And, you know, but we're going to keep it, you know, I think VR, everything they've talked about is keeping it within a very reasonable scope. I think the only real consideration or concern is how do you keep it going? You know, how do you keep it going long term?
True.
You know, like how when the game's been played for a certain amount of time and you have a certain number of population, how do you preserve item identity? And then you get into things like this that we're talking about, where you could think of ideas where it's like, you know, adding these other layers on top of it, or these extra metadata to items that can really extend their lifespan, so to speak.
Right. And this is the kind of discussion that I like to see with our community, because I feel like we're so over being like, oh, I think item identity is important. And then, you know, the other crowd saying, oh, no, it's not that big of a deal. And then, it's just back and forth. But now, like when we're starting to create new ideas and, you know, just kind of hash out like why these things are important to us, like these are the discussions I just really love going through, because I feel like I get more out of them, you know?
Yeah.
And
I mean, ideas are what
does
it's all
too.
about. I agree.
Yeah. But yeah, that great thread. Definitely throw your thoughts in there. Maybe your own ideas on affecting item prestige. This was promoted by Kilson on Twitter. I actually forgot to go through the Twitter responses, but my bad if you had something really insightful. But
good.
But yeah, great stuff as usual. put the link in our description or show notes if you want to go straight to it. Throw your ideas in there. But that's actually it for this week's community discussion.
Sit back and relax. It's time for The Lore You Know. All right, it's time for The Lore You Know. And I said I was going to do it at the beginning, and I actually put a note in to remind myself, but we're going to start drawing for the pledge winners right now. So put your lucky shirt on, cross your fingers and your toes, and if you're hoping to win one of those pledges, that's may the force be with you. But so while we're doing that, let's listen to some lore, because this week we're going to continue the origin story of the gnomes. Well, we heard about their origins last time, actually, and the gnomes finally embarked on a journey within their homeworld of Stormona, despite the reservations of the eldership. And now we learn what became of that expedition, how it led to their arrival on Terminus. So sit back, enjoy the imaginative words of Pantheon's lead writer, the one and only J.N. Gerhardt, as his vision for the gnomes of Pantheon is read by yours truly. Shortly after launch, the hopeful exploration was mired in tragedy as the gnomes learned they could venture but only so far towards Elos at a time. Their eyes were untrained for such light, which grew stronger as they neared and burned many blind at first. Their skin, too dense from the cold of the outer surface, left their bodies faint from the heat of Elos's rays. Thus it was a patient descent, stretched over many generations, that brought the gnomes to the door of the near star at last. When their elderhood finally permitted breaking through the inner crust, there drew a sight beyond imagination. Settled in an open expanse was the majestic Elos, with small planets orbiting about in undisturbed choreography. The walls of this cavernous sphere were lined with glowing mineral new to the gnomes, which they learned held the power of Elos fire. This mineral they named Reservoir, for it held deposits of arcane energy which could be drawn back out and into the very body of a gnome. The powers and abilities it granted were far beyond any warrior or mage. These wielders of Elos fire became known as the Arcanos. Yet this otherworldly paradise, which ought to have been beyond blemish, ushered in the second rift amongst the gnomes. All too quickly the powers of Elos fire were sought in gluttonous measure by the Arcanos, their personal cravings overtaking a discernment for all gnomes. Foreseeing disaster, a splinter of the gnomes petitioned the Elderhood to restrict the use of Elos fire, pleading that the gnomes retreat for a brief time outside the inner crust. These were called profane by the Arcanos hierarchy, a name concocted from accusation and mockery. Though the profane spoke with earnest fear for their brothers and sisters, the allure of the Arcanos crushed their justified concerns. The profane were exiled into a floating prison known as Skyhold, fated to circle Elos till she consumed them. This airborne expanse was built of spent reservoir, though the Arcanos critically misunderstood that reservoir could be infused anew. For years, the profane painstakingly extracted the resource, constructing a pillar within the heart of the Skyhold of pure reservoir. Therein they stored a measure of Elos fire. Yet, as they labored in secret, the Arcanos worked ever more madly to draw ethereal power from the star. To this end, they constructed spires of pure reservoir, aiming the immense towers directly at Elos, sapping power beyond the natural limits the star freely gave. The gorge of her energy began to weaken Elos, loosing the bonds of her power in devastating surges. And her unbridled rays struck the inner crust. Many of the gnomes were consumed. Yet the Skyhold, built to lock the profane away until death, bore well against the lashes of Elos for a time. When a giant hole was struck straight through the crusts of Stormona, the exiled gnomes piloted the structure through it, escaping to the quiet atmosphere of their ancestors. Yet survival had not been perfect. As the bristling energy in the reservoir continued to sift through the Skyhold, a dire conclusion was reached by the gnomes. They must abandon their mortal flesh or perish. When deposited on Terminus, the Skyhold floated undisturbed above Whitethaw for nearly 50 years. A deep, resonant hum slowly bore an inverted cone in the snow directly underneath the hulk. Otherwise, the ship roosted in the skies with silent unconcern.
Now with modest access for wayfarers, it stands as the capital city of the gnomes, striking in its organic majesty, begging more questions than the race cares to answer. Terminus brought a return to the unified workman traits of their ancient brothers and sisters, and the gnomes may not have been so at peace in all their existence.
And that's the lore you know. Love, love, love the gnome story. I think it's so awesome, and I could listen to it over and over again. So yeah, hopefully we've gotten through, I don't know, I'm assuming we've gotten through the winners with our pledge giveaways, and congratulations to all the winners. If that's still going on, well, still good luck. Before we go, before you click the show off and close your podcast app or whatever you're doing, I want you to hang on 1 minute, because there's something else I want to share that I think is really important to say. As I said at the beginning, it's been a big year for the Pantheon community just in general on a lot of fronts, but also for the Rewind as well. And like we're going to get into on the year-end show on December 30th, I wanted to say something for the folks that listen to the Rewind only, because I know how much the show has grown, and I know the numbers, and I know the analytics of it, and I know that it's growing and people are enjoying it. But I want you to know how much it means to us on a personal level, and I'll speak for myself when I say every week I spend way too much mental energy on what, coming up with informative and entertaining content for a show. It's a lot of work, and my week is very much quickly consumed sometimes when I think about these things. But then Sunday comes along, and I listen to it, and I'm in chat, and we're hanging out for the premiere, and it's so rewarding that it makes me ready to start all over again. And there are times when I listen back, I listen to this show and I think, oh, I could have done this better, I could have done that, or I missed this conversation point, I should have said this. And I take all that, and then I think ahead, to ways of making the show more engaging. And for me, it's been a huge learning process. I'm somebody I had no prior content creation experience before doing this. I had always, I had thought of doing a podcast for a long time. And then when it finally came to be that we started doing this, it's been just a growing experience in a huge way for me. But, you've all been there to validate what we're doing. And I can't say with enough emphasis that, how amazing it is. This is a podcast about a game that none of us can actually play yet, right? That's why we're playing other games, like we said in Twitter section. But every week, we meet new people through this show, and the community continues to grow. And all that to say, I don't get like heartfelt all the time like this. Like I'm not like, heart on the sleeve kind of person, but I really am very proud of this show. And I want to continue to strive to make the Rewind the best Pantheon focused podcast that we can make it, right? So it's very important to me. I don't know what my week would look like right now if I didn't spend my time doing this, because it's, like I said, it's what I do. And of course, the flip side of that is, sometimes we have to take time off for ourselves. And we've done that the past week, as we noted earlier. And we are going to take a couple weeks off to enjoy some holiday time with our friends and families, get geared up, for what 2022 holds for this community and for the show. So the next Rewind episode is going to be on Sunday, January 9th of 2022 for episode 84. But I definitely wanted to say that, get that off my chest before we wrap up for the year. And I know, Desrin, you have probably a few things you want to say. So before we go into hibernation, is there anything you want to share with the community?
Yeah, man. For me, I've always liked talking about MMO mechanics and philosophy and all that. But I never really had a great outlet for it. And I honestly didn't really feel like it was really worth putting out there until I hopped on the Plus U, and that really kicked everything off to make me feel comfortable talking about my ideas in public, and just getting to have that conversational kind of a thing that I so enjoy having privately. So being brought on the Rewind, though, it was just really wild for me, and I was totally not expecting it. I was surprised, to say the least, to find that a lot of folks actually enjoy listening to us go back and forth, and it absolutely validated that this thing that I kind of thought was useless, like, actually had some value. And being a part of Pantheon Plus is really starting to give me an outlet for a lot of the random skills that I've acquired over the years. And it's just been so fun and enriching so far. And being here for the premiere on Sundays and getting to engage with the community like we do, it just it seriously makes my week every week. I can't emphasize that enough. It actually is like the highlight of my week. And so, to be sentimental from the bottom of my heart, thank you all so much for just accepting me straight into this, and just being really kind. And I'm so glad that, some of you guys are enjoying having me on the show. I'm so happy to be on the Rewind. It just really has been a huge privilege for me. And so thanks a bunch. I can't wait to see where it all goes. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Right on, man. Well said. Well said. And a lot of sentiments in there that I echo as well. So yeah, great stuff. And I can't wait for what the next year brings. I think we're looking at great things here. So thanks again, everyone, for hanging out with us today. As always, the usual things, like, subscribe, all that stuff, leave a review on your podcast provider, and, hopefully we've piqued your interest about something, and leave a comment. Let us know what you liked, what you didn't like. If you have any ideas for show stuff, we're always open to that kind of thing as well. Anyway, have a wonderful holiday season, everyone. We will see you next year.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Pantheon Plus is not affiliated with Visionary Realms. Be sure to check out our Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube channels under the name Pantheon Plus. You can follow Theric at Pantheon Theric on Twitter, and Desrin at DesrinDoes also on Twitter. And you can stay up to date with all things Pantheon at www.pantheon.plus. Until next time, cheers, and thanks for listening.